But to have former apartheid South Africa being the only nation who is trying to get this started is quite something, I think. They know well what apartheid is. Israel's response is that they're the devil, and that even that October 7th was an act of genocide against them. The bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust was October 7th, which it was horrible.
And,
it's horrible.
And that may, that probably is true. I mean, it's not a genocide. It's a terrorist.
Right. It's not a genocide. I mean, there's no very specific definitions.
Yeah, there's no way that attack could have grown into a genocide to kill. It had a limited scope. It wasn't like, if only they just gotten away with it every day and kept killing thousands of people.
Right.
Which is, but you have to look at the scale of these things. And obviously that's a ridiculous assertion in the face of 30,000 dead Palestinians.
Yeah. Yeah. And, they do the numbers of it was 10 9/11s or something, or 6 9/11s. But, if you are going to do that math, I think that puts Palestinians at about 300 9/11s over the last 2 months. So, and the other way that the U.S. is, interfering, the U.S. diplomats are trying to persuade Switzerland, the custodians of the Geneva Conventions governing the rules of conduct during war, with the ability to decide when meetings are held to discuss noncompliance. So the U.S. diplomats are trying to persuade Switzerland to set aside the application of the conventions to Israel's genocidal campaign against Palestinians in Gaza. So the U.S. just keeps trying to run interference as Biden bypasses Congress twice to send them more arms to carry out their genocide.
And let me see, what did it say? We are once again respected in the world. Do you think bypassing the genocide convention is respectable in the world? And being the only superpower to veto calls for peace and a genocide is respected in the world? Sorry, this cat is so drugged up. She is supposed to be, she'll just be a fucking little noodle on the floor the whole time.
She's just jumping all over the place.
Yeah, sorry.
Amazing. And the U.S. has completely made a mockery anyway, right? We've removed ourselves from the International Criminal Court, both the U.S. and Israel, and actually we fought to prohibit them from calling Russia up on war crimes, even though, from the podium, we've got Jack Kirby or John Kirby, whatever, talking about, and Matt Miller, that right away, the war crimes of Russia, but won't talk about war crimes of
John Kirby
Israel.
Damn near cried on the podium, Mr. Pentagon guy, when talking about the atrocities of Russia. Yeah. And then you counter that to him basically saying, well, war is hell for 30,000 Palestinians dead.
That's just what happens. But even with Russia, the Biden administration is fighting to prevent them from being called up, because the problem is, and it's the same reason why, Trump could have gotten impeached for violating I'm going to get the thing wrong. Is it the Hatch Act? No, what is the thing where you can't promote yourself from?
The hatch is from the podium.
Yeah. Okay. Right. But, or, the insider trading or all of the corruption, the financial corruption. The reason that they don't call him out on that is because it implicates Nancy Pelosi and, Joe Manchin and all, right? So if
under Biden,
if the U.S. allowed the International Criminal Court to call up Russia for its war crimes, then it opens up a whole spectrum of, if you're going to say Russia is committing a genocide or war crimes, then how can you not say, when you see what Israel is doing or what the U.S. does all the time, right? So it is just a mass conspiracy. I mean, truly, they are just all in cahoots and just getting away with literal genocide.
They're getting away with it, but what's different is it's not, it is transparent that they're getting away with it. that they're doing. It's transparent that they're doing it. It's transparent that the Biden administration is supporting it, financing it, funding it, blocking investigation of it, trying to profit from it.
Yep.
And there's a lot of talk about, what's the real U.S. motive, and a big part of it is I forget the name of the strait, but they're trying, if they clear out, if they clear out Gaza, it saves them a lot of money on building this strait that lets them stop the main passage of goods through the ocean, bypasses going all the way around Africa, and you can cut through. But Egypt makes all the money on that strait that exists right now, where the U.S. and Israel would benefit from all the profits if it's built.
It's like
and it's
$6
built
billion
faster,
a year.
And a big part of it is having to nuke
bypass
basically
Gaza. That is a big, that's certainly the financial interest. I do think there's even like a deeper psychology going on with a lot of people in Israel who have been conditioned to think a certain way about their Palestinian neighbors,
for sure.
But I think you're right. Like that is
our interest. Like,
100%.
how is it economically benefiting us?
Right.
It's not about stability in the region, because this whole action is making the U.S. and the whole region less safe.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even debatable.
Right.
I mean, anyone who would argue that is an idiot. They're a paid idiot.
Yeah. So, okay. That is interesting that South Africa is calling them up on genocide. Also, survivors of the Nova Rave Festival are suing the Israeli security agencies for 200 million shekels for failing to prevent that massacre, which I think, is interesting. And right away, very early on after October 7th, the Israeli newspapers were, at least Haaretz was, calling out Netanyahu and the IDF for allowing that to happen in a way that if anyone in the US did, they were immediately called anti-Semitic. It was sort of interesting. There's a lot more. However, I think it's like 98% of Israelis are perfectly fine or want even a harsher response against Palestinians. So it's not like, they want to get rid of Netanyahu and then have this like peaceful one-state solution.
Right.
But I do think it's interesting that they're trying to hold some people accountable. So that's one part. The next part that we want to talk about, there's just like a little bit of a deep dive, which I thought was really interesting, on the way media creates the narrative, and the difference between how they talk about Palestinians and Israelis in these past 2.5 months. So there's an article that did a lot of, data mining to see, following Fox, CNN, and MSNBC. I think it was just those 3 channels. So when they talked about it was both in the way they discussed Israeli victims and Palestinian victims, and also the actual amount of airtime that was given to discussing what was happening to Israelis versus what was happening to Palestinians. So this was the Israel mentioned versus Palestinians mentioned over the first month. That was, I think, if you can see on the left, it's almost, I think it was like 98,000 mentions of Israelis versus 15,000 mentions of Palestinians. That was in the first month of what was happening. And knowing that like the very next day, like every time they talk about hostages and was it 240 hostages, I think, some of those were members of the military, so not civilian hostages. That is a little different. But like the US media never talks about the almost 10,000 Palestinians who are being kept in prison. And, some of them haven't even been charged. Many of them are children. some of them it's on trumped up charges. So like 10,000, almost 10,000 people with no ability to fight against that system, and nobody, saying bring our people home.
Part of the media, I mean, obviously the media has a mission here, which is to make Israel look like the good guys on behalf of the U.S., make the U.S. not look like the bad guys here, yada yada. But it's literally impossible for Palestinians to express their point of view on these shows because they can't leave their country freely. They literally don't have the ability to come out and speak on these shows. Now, you can have people that are Palestinian who have, family members and whatnot, but nobody from a Palestinian government is on these shows next to the person from Israel.
From IDF, yeah. By the way, I mean, sorry, but there are Palestinian scholars. There are, dignitaries. There are diplomats. There are people that they could. I know but there are people they could have. So that is a complete. That is a choice on how they want to construct this, both to excuse and enable the genocide, and because I honestly think most people in the West, especially in the U.S., most people in the U.S. truly have bought the propaganda. And I mean, it's hard even to say it out loud, but they truly don't think that Palestinian lives are worth anything.
So I do disagree on that a little bit. I think we have enough people here that absolutely do believe it at this point. And I think it's a turning point in the power of the media that's kind of happening in front of us.
Yeah.
And part of that is just an age difference. A lot of younger people get their media from other sources. They're not brainwashed.
There's a big divide between and old people.
Yeah, there's that big divide there that's naturally happening, but it's also such a gripping story that I think people are looking beyond MSNBC and CNN in ways that they weren't before.
Right.
And it's powerful, and younger people are really attached to this story in a way that this injustice sort of speaks to a lot of injustice here. And how can we let these people, how can we watch a Holocaust happen by the people who were victims of the Holocaust? It's not Holocaust per se, but so it sparks a lot of anger with young people, which then gets projected. MSNBC and CNN be damned to their parents and to their elders. And I mean, obviously in the Jewish community, there's a gap too, younger people have a different take on this, So I think it's just increasing the divide where
but young people don't watch MSNBC, CNN, and Fox. So you're totally right. And that is the divide. But I think that's why this paper that and I mean, there's discussion about the language or, whenever it's the massacre on October 7th, but then they talk about Palestinians say, according to Palestinians that, they always are trying to sort of qualify any killings that happen, on the any Palestinian deaths are, left to die, right? Like the babies were left to die, as opposed to massacred.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course. Yeah.
And so that framing, there's
you will never have Palestinian victims on any level.
It's like the worthy victims, right? That's the whole, is that Noam Chomsky, the whole idea
the tragedy of war led to the death of a couple civilians, or whatever.
Right.
Not the gruesome, we all know the narratives on this stuff, but I don't think it works as well anymore. And I think the harder they try now, it's not necessarily going to change policy, because in a lot of ways, Israel has already won this thing. They've gotten what they wanted. We are at a point now where it's unlivable there.
Yep.
And so now what is the solution now that it's unlivable?
I mean, they're doing ethnic cleansing. And, the thing that's so fascinating because they can't really pick one narrative, right? They say everybody is Hamas. All Palestinians are Hamas. Even babies are Hamas. Nobody's innocent. It's a fight between light and dark, evil and good, and all that kind of stuff. And then they're like, well, Egypt, why don't you take these people? Why doesn't the West? Like, they want, the US and Europe to take it. Like, so you're saying that these people are so pathologically crazy terrorists for no reason, out of the blue. It's just they're born evil, right? And now the rest of the world should take them. Like, I don't know. And nobody, I just cannot believe that we are watching this happen. It's been since October 8th. We are watching thousands of people. I think yesterday, 2 days ago, 200 people a day. I think we're at 12,000 children. And nobody is coming in. If this happened, we would be sending troops somewhere else. Not that we need any more troops, but nobody is stopping this. And now, as you said, it's unlivable. It's so unlivable that IDF soldiers are coming down with intestinal issues because they're in Gaza where there's no electricity. So the sewage systems aren't working. So fecal matter is mixing with mud that they are walking through. There's no clean water. And now they're getting sick. It's a lot like the COVID thing where, it's like, if you don't vaccinate the world, this doesn't end. So Bill Gates can keep his, patent on whichever vaccine, but that comes back. It's not like it's like the smoking section. It still is going to come. Even for them, they are hurting themselves.
Yeah. And we're really looking. We don't, the public has such short-term memory. 9/11 was not that long ago, and they keep comparing this to 9/11. Well, what's happened from all the 9/11? All the first responders have cancer, dying.
Yep.
And you're talking about a whole city that is basically dust and rubble and mud and sewage. Right. And
this will have
the idea that all these people aren't going to come down with, the obvious diseases are diarrhea, which affect kids. Starvation. We're starving these people right now. They're all starving. Half the country is literally starving right now. But long term, you can't just go back to that environment with all the dust and rubble and cancerous stuff. Something has to happen. And what's the solution? Well, the solution at this point is some sort of humanitarian solution where these people get to live somewhere, right? And so even if they live and they have a good life, well, Israel's won because they get their straight. The U.S. has won because they get their straight. They bypass Egypt. They, allegedly it's for economic power.
Really is genocidal.
It is.
Seriously, the Israel's version of From the River to the Sea is genocidal. We're watching it play out. Everything that they accuse Palestinians of. And
people know it. The world knows it, especially, but a lot of people in the U.S. know it, and that's the one thing I would say is a positive, because it's positive that people are seeing what our government is capable of. It has been doing for decades.
Yeah.
Now we're still powerless because we're not using our power to do anything about it. But I think a lot of the unions coming up and union solidarity, if you get some convergence there with issues like war.
The fact that the UAW spoke out against it and wants a ceasefire, the fact that there are unions who refuse to unload weapons or load weapons at the docks. It is people power, but the devastation is, it's really hard even to wrap your mind around it, what these people are living through every day. It's 7:10. Yeah.
I know, we should go. But this is just a reminder that Israel is paying a fuck ton of kids to have these little comments online. So when you're reading a lot of this stuff online,
it's not just organic.
It's not. It's paid stuff. And we don't have the other slide, but there's another slide that showed how much you're getting paid per tweet.
I know. You know what? I tried to put it up. It was so small. It was really hard. It was like so faint on there. It was really hard to read. But yeah, it is all broken down. There are different levels. Like how much you contribute is how much you get paid. Like right.
And so this is a job for these people. A lot of people are making money by doing this stuff. Now they probably believe it. I mean, a lot of Israelis have been brainwashed to think that Palestinians are lesser people, and so that if you can get a paycheck from it and you believe it already, you're going to do it. And they're spending countless money on this, and we're helping fund the propaganda against our own country that you get on Twitter.
Yeah,
I mean, people see through it, but you just always have to be aware that you're up against this, with whether it's COVID, whether it's Palestine, whether it's climate change. Think about who benefits from this stuff when you see a lot of these bullshit accounts.
Cui bono, absolutely.